All right, hey, welcome to the Once Upon a Time in Huntsville podcast, hosted by me, Sampley. Today, I'm solo again. I'm doing part two of my favorite movies of 2021. Real quick update on me and this podcast. Next week, I'm going to be dropping a new episode that I just did with Noah Winter. I've had him on the show a couple times, and we discuss. We talked a lot about Christopher Nolan, the art of movie making, and his some of his experience on a TV set he's working on right now over in Atlanta, superhero show. So tune in next week, or I guess click or download or whatever next week, because I whenever I drop one with Noah, I always hear that people are like, man, like he just Noah is he's an intellect. He probably wouldn't admit that, but I could just listen to him talk about movies and TV and a whole lot of stuff just for hours. So I'm always blessed to have him on the show. Another update, filmmaking update. I've been working on this short film called Be Careful for a couple months now. It's really an homage to Alfred Hitchcock, specifically the film Psycho. I had the idea for the movie a couple years ago, and I actually shot like this proof of concept with Aaron and another buddy of mine, and it's not great. So I was like, I really want to do this again and shoot the entire thing, and I did that. I shot it on just my the DSLR that I have. I shot it with my equipment. I hired actors I had never worked with before, which was really cool. One of them being Anthony Sells, who I just had on the show a couple weeks ago. And Erin helped me light, and she ran sound, which was awesome. She really helped me with a whole bunch of stuff. I'm so thankful for her. But I've been editing it, and I've sent out kind of maybe a possible final copy to some close friends today who I really value their opinion, and I've gotten some notes and some good feedback on it. So I may release that in a couple weeks. I may play around with it a little more. So be on the lookout for that. And then yesterday, I got together with Alex Haynes, Kelly McNabb, and Sabrina Stedman, and both Alex's Mr. Haynes' wife, Jules, and his daughter, Caitlin, helped behind the camera. They helped me out. Jules was scripting, and Caitlin ran a second camera. We shot this short film I wrote called Open House. It's a little comedy short about this realtor trying to sell her first house and a client that has a lot in his mind. Let's just say that, or not a client that, but a possible buyer has a lot in his mind, and they kind of clash. So I was organizing all that footage today, so hopefully I can. That one was really just kind of for fun. So I should have that up within a month or two if I get some time to sit down and edit it. But anyways, let's get back into. Oh yeah, and you can view all that stuff. I usually post it on YouTube. I just started up a Vimeo account, so I don't know, so I can look professional, I guess. Anyways, let's get back to my favorite movies of 2021, which again is kind of clickbait because I'm just going through my movie journal and talking about specific ones I really want to get through. I have an entire journal right here that doesn't even finish. Oh, no, it does finish. Oh, okay, I see. I just continued on with this year. Oh, wow. That was the last movie I watched this year? Interesting. So I'm going to go through these pretty fast because last podcast, I didn't want to do a part two, but here I am. So let's just get into it. So I watched The Last Blockbuster, which was directed by Taylor Morden. I watched that back in March last year, and it was this really interesting documentary about the very last Blockbuster, which I believe was in Oregon. It may still be there, but it's run by this woman who celebrates, stores where you can go rent movies. I could think of I wanted to say it in a beautiful way, but I couldn't get it out because it's just Blockbuster. But I thought it was like an hour and 20 minutes. I thought the documentary itself could have been maybe 10, 15 minutes. Like they had so much input from people who I just did not care. Like they all were essentially saying the same thing just over and over and over again. I'm like, why are they padding this documentary about Blockbuster so much? But I would say watch it anyways because if you're in business school right now or even getting a minor in business, you should watch this movie because it should be called The Last Blockbuster, aka How to Ruin a Business, because the guys at Blockbuster shot themselves in the foot repeatedly. It was all right though. I probably won't watch it again. Next up, I watched The Isle of Dogs, directed by Wes Anderson. It came out in 2018. The first time I watched this movie, we were headed to the beach, the Gulf Shores, and we watched it. Like I think we either rented a car or my mom had just gotten this new minivan, and we watched the movie like on the little small screens, which was I'm sure Wes Anderson would have a fit if he found that out. I think he's a very traditional film type guy, watching on a big screen. So this was like the second time I watched it, and I think it's great. Bryan Cranston voices the main dog. It has it's a great story, themes, the animation. I love stop motion animation. I don't want to say too much about it, so if you haven't seen it, you should check it out. It's by the same director, if you're not familiar with Wes Anderson, who did Fantastic Mr. Fox. If I could turn the page, which I believe I also watched that year or last year, maybe not. I guess we'll find that in a bit. Next up, I watched this for a film class, The 39 Steps, directed by Alfred Hitchcock. It came out in 1935. I don't really remember liking this one a lot. I think we watched it in my film class because I hadn't seen it's like one of the few ones I hadn't seen by Hitchcock. I wasn't really pleased with it. I just remember like the main actor in that just kind of, I don't know, I just didn't dig him. And it was kind of predictable. Next up, Aaron and I watched Steven Soderbergh's Logan Lucky with Adam Driver, Daniel Craig, and Channing Tatum. That's like a funny, just odd movie. And I remember Daniel Craig in that just being hilarious, and Adam Driver is just so dry. And I just remember being a really funny movie, and I remember the ending kind of in a way it was like, oh man, like I don't want to ruin anything, but let's just say that they're trying to pull this heist. I believe it's NASCAR that they're stealing from, but it's really I put for cons Seth MacFarlane. I remember that they had him as like this guy with like a really terrible accent and like this big mustache, I think, and I remember it just being like, oh, that was a weird choice. I don't know, I didn't like that. Next up, Aaron and I watched Bombshell, directed by Jay Roach. We both did not like this movie. It felt like it was trying to be an Adam McKay movie, but it just wasn't any good. I don't want to talk too much about that one just because like I really don't remember a lot of it. I just remember Aaron and I were like, that was, wish we had watched something else. Next movie we watched, most of the time I'm watching a movie with Aaron, so I say we. That's who I'm referring to, my wife. Next up, we watched The Truman Show, which every time I watch this movie, like it gets better, and it's I think it's a masterpiece. Maybe one of my favorite endings of all time. Probably my favorite Jim Carrey performance. Man, it's just, I mean, if you haven't seen Truman Show by now, like you gotta see it. Peter Weir is an underrated director because I think he also did Poet Society. He did Witness with Harrison Ford. And he did another one that's pretty big, I'm pretty sure. Underrated director, but Truman Show, I think, is probably his best. Next up, we watched this for film class, Family Plot. It was Alfred Hitchcock's last movie. It came out in 1976. And, it's people often say that Hitchcock kind of was, off his, kind of downgraded throughout his time because he was really old when he made this. And even though Family Plot is by no means a masterpiece, I think it's just a really fun movie to watch. Like, it's a lot better than a lot of other people's movies. So I think Hitchcock is obviously held to a higher standard. I mean, Psycho, Vertigo, Over Your Window, Birds, Strangers on a Train, which Aaron and I just watched. She had never seen it. It's great. But check out Family Plot if you just want a kind of fun, easy to watch mystery film. Next up, we watched Atonement, directed by Joe Wright, which came out in '07. I'm glad Aaron and I watched this together because we always there's a quote in there that we're like, I think we had to pause the movie because we were laughing so hard, but it wasn't a line that was intended to be funny. It was they're all sitting down for dinner together, and like the older brother arrives, and he's like, and like he's looking at his younger brother, and he's like, "Oh, what? How many sins did you commit today, brother?" And they're like, oh, you're so funny. And Aaron and I were just like, I don't like that guy. But also, the movie looks, from a camera perspective, amazing. It is shot brilliantly. I remember the score was really great with the typewriter being integrated into the score. The movie itself, I can see why a lot of people like it. I can understand why it was nominated for a bunch of Oscars. But if you think about this movie for a couple seconds, you're like, oh, that doesn't really make any sense. Oh, that doesn't really make any sense. And the main character is like, I don't want to spoil too much if you haven't seen it because I don't like spoiling movies. Spoiler alert, because I'm about to go off on this one. Or maybe I should. No. I'm gonna wait. I'm gonna wait for Aaron to do this one because I'm sure she would want to be a part of this. So maybe Aaron and I, next podcast we do together, we can sit down and discuss Atonement. So we'll have that coming out. I'll mention that to her. She'd be down for that. The next movie I watched was Cherry. It was the first Russo's brothers film that wasn't a Marvel enterprise. Tom Holland was the star. I put a mess. I could see the potential, but yeah, I thought it was overlong. They try to do too much and say too much. It was like bragging about its subtext in a way where you're like, it's not subtext if you're bragging about it. Like, the movie came off as if like, hey, look what we're talking about. Like, we're geniuses, when like they actually weren't focused on what the movie should have actually been about. But it wasn't a terrible movie. I was just kind of, it had potential. I'll just say that, and I think it missed the mark. Next up, I watched The Producers. 1967, Mel Brooks. Man, I'm gonna be honest. I know this is like a comedy classic. I did not like most of this movie. I'm not a big fan of just screaming. And I feel like a lot of this movie was just screaming the entire time. I don't know. Maybe I need to rewatch it because I'm sure a lot of people are like, "What? The Producers is hilarious." But I don't know. It just didn't work for me. Maybe I wasn't in a comedy mood when I watched it. I put it on and because I'd never seen it before. A lot of it, I think has the potential to be funny, but for me, I'm not like I don't know. I feel I feel scared whenever I talk about like classic films that people genuinely love, and I'm just like, I didn't really care for it. But I guess everyone has, their own movies. There's certain classics that you just don't dig as much as other people. So I'm going to skip talking about that. Next up, Aaron and I watched You've Got Mail, directed by Nora Ephron. It came out in 1998 when Aaron and I were both born. That's one that Aaron and I should talk about too, because there's a couple scenes in that we were just like... We know it's a rom-com, but there are a couple of scenes where we're just like, oh, that was an interesting way to film that. Like there's one point where Tom Hanks, instead of like holding down on the backspace button, he just keeps pressing it and 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 pressing it. And it was just like, it infuriated me because I was just like, just hold it down. But, and then there's some other, I had no idea Dave Chappelle was going to be in that movie. He plays Tom Hanks's like wingman / buddy in that movie. It was weird to see him kind of like a, I don't know, like non-satirical, non-parody type, like non-skit thing. I don't know. It was interesting. Next up, we watched Blue Valentine, which is a movie that you should not watch on Valentine's Day. I'll just say that. Ryan Gosling and Michelle Williams give amazing performances. It's one that like a lot of people really don't talk about, and I'm not really sure why. Especially Ryan Gosling's performance. I know he was nominated for a Golden Globe, but he missed out on an Oscar nom. Michelle Williams got an Oscar nom, but I honestly think this is like one of Ryan Gosling's like top three best performances. Like, both of them are just so great. Yeah, they feel like a real life couple. Next up, I watched Akira Kurosawa's Dreams, which was like I watched it late at night. So like in it, like my memory of it like feels like a dream. I just remember it being like shot beautifully. It might have been, was it shot on Technicolor? I just remember the colors just really popping, and I couldn't remember really. Off the top of my head, I'll have to watch it again. I can't really remember certain like the segments because it's split up kind of like in short films. But I just remember really being there. There was like a village of water mills, and I just remember being like, "Oh, that's gorgeous! What a gorgeous shot!" Oh yeah, Martin Scorsese plays Vincent Van Gogh in like one of them, and I thought that was really funny. Next up, I watched Drive, another Ryan Gosling vehicle. Get it? Another Ryan Gosling film. I think it's a masterpiece. From a directing standpoint, from an acting standpoint, writing standpoint, it's a phenomenal film that does have a couple scenes that definitely could have been toned down or taken out. But I think that ending is one of my favorite, and what a great soundtrack. Next up, I watched Hacksaw Ridge with Andrew Garfield, and I just remember watching this movie and being like, man, this I think Andrew Garfield's great. But what is his name leaves me, but he plays his dad in the movie. And I just thought, and he's a really good actor, and I just was like, I don't know. I try not to get too much into about the negatives of stuff, but yeah, it was an all right film. I thought the themes were really cool. I think it's cool. I'm a sucker for true stories that are inspirational, like most people are. So I probably won't watch it again, but I enjoyed watching it. Next up, oh yeah, Aaron and I went on a Godfather binge because she had never seen them before, and I think I'd only seen them once, so this was my second time watching them, and they are just perfect films. Like, if you've never seen The Godfather and Godfather Part 2, like, what are you doing? You gotta watch. And it's so hard to pick which one I like more. I think I lean more towards The Godfather, but Godfather Part 2 is also just exemplary. I mean, just on a filmmaking standpoint, on an acting standpoint, writing standpoint. Like, both those movies are so long, but they're just so interesting. It feels like you're reading a great book the entire time. That's not a controversial opinion to say that. Those are just classic films. And I actually got to see Godfather. The very first time I saw it, I got to see it in theaters. They showed it over at the AMC nearby, and I was just blown away. That's so cool that I got to see that for the first time on the big screen. Next up, Aaron and I went and saw Nobody, which was the Bob Odenkirk action film that like kind of caught a whole bunch of people off guard. I'm a huge Bob Odenkirk fan. His sketch comedy, his writing. Obviously, Better Call Saul, and he was awesome in this movie. The things he got to do. I believe it was either directed by the guy who directs a lot of the John Wick's movie or has written the John Wick movies. So it's not like one of those movies you're going in for like this, this amazing story. It's very cliche, and it acknowledges that at times, but it has great action. And it's definitely a dad movie. That's how I would categorize it. It's definitely in the dad genre. Next up, I watched The Iron Giant for the first time, directed by Brad Bird, who also directed The Incredibles. I had never seen this before. I never saw it growing up as a kid, but I really, really, really enjoyed it. The animation, man, I miss 2D animation so much. And this, of course, mixes in some 3D animation too, but 2D animation. I know. Obviously, like Japanese animated films, or I guess anime are 2D animation. Those are gorgeous, but I really want America, specifically Disney. I know it's so much more expensive to do 2D animation, but they have the money. I know they have the money, but Iron Giant, yeah, it's solid, really solid animated film. You can definitely see. I really think Brad Bird is an underrated director. I hope he's got more projects coming up. Next up, I watched Bulworth, directed by Warren Beatty, which was one of the most cringiest movies I've ever seen. I definitely understand what it was trying to do as a movie, and that they were being self-deprecating / cringy on purpose. But it didn't play for me. Warren Beatty rapping. It's funny a couple times in, but then you're just like, okay, it feels like a gimmick. Next up, I watched Napoleon Dynamite. I showed that to my brothers. They had never seen it before, my younger brothers. And man, what a great film. It was also great to like be laughing with them. It's always great when you can watch a comedy with other people, or just any movie with other people, but especially a comedy you like and you're showing it to someone, they're laughing at all the parts that you laugh at. Erin has never seen this, so I'd love to sit down and watch Napoleon Dynamite with her. I think she'd really like it. I mean, it's just a classic film with so many classic quotes and moments. Next up, I watched Michael Haneke's original Funny Games, because he actually ended up making an American version later. I think this is he Russian or Swedish? I know that's bad. I should remember this. But this might be the most terrifying movie I've ever seen. I'm definitely not going to watch it again. It was disturbing in a great way, but it was just, wow. It was a tough movie to watch. Don't watch it if you do not like horror or thriller or creepy films. Next up, I watched The Proposition, which was like a Western starring Guy Pearce, who I think is extremely underrated. One of my favorite performances is him as Leonard Shelby in Christopher Nolan's Memento. It was a solid like art house Western. I really enjoyed it. I don't remember a whole bunch from it. I just remember that I think he was trying to save his younger brother in the movie, and he had an issue with one of his friends or the sheriff. But I'd have to watch that again to really give you a full in-depth review. Next out, I watched Knives Out for the second time, Rian Johnson's mystery whodunit. And man, what a great creative film. I remember Aaron and I went and saw this with my parents. I think it came out like close to Thanksgiving. We went and saw it in theaters. And I watched the trailer, and for some reason, the way the trailer is cut just makes it look it kind of just makes it look like a stereotypical like Netflix movie, where they were just like, oh, if we just hire a bunch of like famous people will watch it and it will get streamed a bunch of times. So I wasn't too excited to see it, but I remember the reviews being really superb. So I was like, oh, okay, we should watch it if the reviews are really good. And I like most of these actors. And it blew me away. Like Rian Johnson, I know a lot of people give him crud for the second Star Wars. I couldn't tell you what The Last Jedi. I think I haven't seen it, so I'm not really sure about that. But I can tell you he made one heck of a. It's like an Alfred Hitchcock film essentially, and I'm sure he watched a whole bunch to prepare for directing that movie. But I don't want to say too much, because if you haven't seen Knives Out, you got to go see it. I think it's on Amazon Prime. Next up, I watched Rango by Gore. I don't know. That's just funny to me that I watched Knives Out, then I watched Rango the next day by Gore Verbinski, who directed, I think, all 3 of the Pirates of the Caribbeans. The original ones, and Johnny Depp voices Rango. This actually won Best Animated film at the Oscars. So Verbinski's got himself an Oscar. But this is a great animated film. I think I watched it just because my brother Cade kept on talking about it and how good it was, and I just had never seen it all the way through. That's funny. Next up, I guess that was the day I went and saw 12 Mighty Orphans at the premiere. I did put it in my journal, and yes, I did give it a 10 out of 10. That I said 12 Mighty Orphans is the best football film since Rudy, and Luke Wilson gives his best performance of all time. Man, I still agree with that. I do. I know that's like supremely egotistical that I would give my own film a 10 out of 10, but come on, it was my first kind of big movie where I actually had a part in. I was really excited to go see it, And I do stand by that. I think Luke Wilson does give his best performance of all time. That is just a solid. I think in a couple, like 5, 10, maybe even 15 years, that movie will one day like be appreciated as it should be. And again, I'm in the movie, so don't take everything I just said like verbatim or like, I don't know. I'm proud of that movie. I'll just say I'm gonna move on now. Oh, that's funny. Next up, we watched the Royal Tenenbaums. I showed that to Aaron. It's Arrested Development as a feature film. I wonder, because this movie came out in 2001, so I mean, it is eerily similar to Arrested Development, but it's a great comedy. Gene Hackman's, I want to say, like his last role since his retirement. He's hilarious in it. The whole cast is hilarious. And the Wilson brothers are in it. They're great. Ben Stiller is in it. He's got that great. He's got the two young twins. They have some great moments. Yeah, it's a solid. It's actually probably one of my favorite Anderson films. Next up, I watched Ferris Bueller's Day Off. That's just like, I think that's definitely my favorite John Hughes movie. The movie's just it's pure fun. How can you not like Ferris Bueller's Day Off? Next up, I watched Tarzan, which in my opinion, I think is the greatest Disney movie of all time. Yes, that is the movie that I grew up watching. But as an adult, I've seen it several times again. And I remember the first time, a couple years ago, I watched it. And I was kind of worried because I hadn't seen it all the way through in such a long time that it wasn't going to age as well as it had in my kid brain. But I honestly do think it is like the most underrated animated film of all time. I think it is fantastically animated. The soundtrack by Phil Collins is, I mean, rocks. The story is thrilling. The pacing's great. There are just certain shots in the movie that are just animated so perfectly. I actually have a poster. It's one of my favorite shots ever is when Tarzan is battling Sabor. And it's funny. The great musical segments. I stand by that. A lot of people obviously go to The Lion King, Beauty and the Beast, Little Mermaid, or all the other classic Disney films. But that I think if you're listening to this and you haven't seen Tarzan in a while and you're doubting what I'm saying, you should heavily consider rewatching it. Next up, I watched Metallica, Some Kind of Monster, which was this large documentary on the band Metallica. I'm a big fan. I've gotten to see Metallica live. They put on one heck of a show. Me and my dad got to go see him at the Braves new stadium in Atlanta, like 3-4 years ago. I wasn't a huge fan of the documentary. It was kind of weird to watch as someone who appreciates most of their music. I feel like they're obviously a controversial band for a certain album they put out. That I can't remember whose idea. I think it was Lars' idea for there to be no guitar solos, and then like this thing he did with the drum that a lot of people say that it doesn't really work. If you're really fascinated with the band, you've probably already seen the documentary because it is like 20 years old. But if you haven't, you should go check it out. I think I watched it out on Netflix. Next up, Aaron and I watched season 1, the only season of Firefly, which I think is a perfect series. Next up, we watched Serenity, the film, which was kind of a sequel to Firefly, and I had never seen it, actually. I've seen Firefly, the show, maybe 3 times now, maybe even 4. But this was the first time I've seen Serenity. And I was really disappointed with the movie. I kind of wish I had never seen it. Next up, I watched The Crow, which is most famous for Bruce Lee's son. I forget his first name. It will come to me when I'm done with the podcast. For accidentally being shot with a blank, and he was killed. The movie itself is not great, but has moments of grandeur, like with certain shots. It was a good idea, and I know it's based off a graphic novel. Oh, I just hit the mic. I'm going to definitely have to remember to fix that if it was too loud. But that's what that movie is most remembered for. I'm like, I feel like a lot of people have heard of the movie just because of that, but probably haven't seen it. But it was a good kind of cheesy action film to have on in the background. Next up, I watched Christopher Nolan's Insomnia, a remake of the Swedish film with Skarsgård, I believe, who plays the detective in that. I think Insomnia is his most underrated film, and I love Al Pacino in that. I love Robin Williams in that. Hilary Swank is great in it too. Really a solid. That was like his first studio film because he did Following, which he self financed. He did Memento, which I believed was later bought by Newmarket Films, which has now been acquired by someone else. So this was like, I believe Warner Brothers allowing him to shoot this and giving him quite a bit of money to go shoot this, and I think it turned out amazing. Next up, we watched Memento, which I was just talking about earlier with Guy Pearce and Carrie Ann Moss and the guy who plays Teddy. He's so great in that. The guy with the mustache and the glasses, aka the guy who turned down Commissioner Gordon in the Batman trilogy because he said he was tired of playing side characters. Man, he missed out. That although Gary Oldman, is just flawless for that part. Man, I bet that's when he looks at it and is like, oh, maybe I shouldn't have turned that one down. But Memento, it's funny. I've been reading this book called The Nolan Variations, and just reading through how like he designed this film and wrote this film with his brother Jonathan, or who he refers to Jonah in the book. It's just fascinating how Nolan's mind works. He's one of my favorite directors, if not my favorite. But you should check that book out if you really, really like Nolan's movies, and you really, or also if you just want to like understand his brain and his filmmaking process, which actually Noah and I talk a lot about in the episode that's dropping next week. Next up, I watched 8th Grade. This was my second time watching it. It's directed by Bo Burnham. It came out in 2018 or 2019, I believe. I think it's a perfect film. It perfectly encapsulates what it feels like to be in middle school. I feel like all these like teenage movies are always made about high school, but and I feel like middle school is always kind of left out in the rain. And this movie like perfectly captures what it's like to be a middle schooler, and it has one of the sweetest moments with the daughter and the dad in the final couple scenes of the movie. And I think it's one that it needs a lot more attention. Bo Burnham, I really hope he does another narrative feature. Next up, I watched Take Shelter, which is, maybe Michael Shannon's like greatest work. He is just really, really solid in that film, especially his freak out scene. But that is a movie that Buddy and I have debated over the ending. If you haven't seen it, I don't want to spoil it. But Jeff Nichols directs that, who he did Mud, which my buddy Jacob got to work with. That was his first big movie. But Take Shelter, definitely check it out. I think it's on Amazon Prime. It's an amazing film that plays with your mind the entire time, and it's got an amazing ending. I even hate saying a movie has an amazing ending because I feel like that's a spoiler within itself. But next up, I watched Dog Day Afternoon, which is one of Al Pacino's greatest performances. Like, he is just dripping in sweat the entire time. He is like hilarious. Yet you sometimes you're just like, what are you doing? And sometimes you're like, oh man, like I really want him to make it out of this. It's based on a true story. It was directed by Sidney Lumet, or Lumet, however you say his name. I've heard his last name said so many different ways. Which also has he wrote an amazing book called Sidney Lumet. That's how I'm going to say it. Sidney Lumet Making Movies, that I recommend to like any aspiring filmmaker I meet, just because like he goes in depth. I mean, he really just chapter by chapter covers pretty much every single area of filmmaking. So definitely check out Dog Day Afternoon if you haven't seen it. What a great bank heist film where everything just goes wrong. Next up, I watched The Fisher King, which was Robin Williams. And what's his face? Jeff Bridges. I was going to say Jeff Nichols. I was like, no, that's the director. I believe Terry Gilliam directed this. Yeah, from Monty Python, and it was a really solid film. It was quite funny. I don't really remember how it ends. I just remember the characters. The characters definitely stood out big time in that film. Next up, I watched Awakenings. Aaron and I watched this. We Robin Williams and Robert De Niro. Um, Man, that's a tough film to watch. It's almost similar to. It's very akin to The Flowers of Algernon, almost. Robert De Niro plays this disabled person who's kind of stuck in the mind of like an 8-year-old, I think, maybe even younger. And Robin Williams plays this doctor. He was Robin Williams. Man, what an actor! Because he could do these absurd characters, and then he could go and play this super subtle, dramatic role. And he really bared his soul in a lot of these films, and especially in Awakenings. It's a tough one to watch. It'll definitely make you misty-eyed, but definitely check it out if you're in the mood for something a little bit more dramatic and with great acting too. Aaron and I watched The Blind Side, which in my opinion, has aged horribly. Again, I'm a sucker for inspirational sport films, especially football movies. We both were kind of like, why is Sandra Bullock playing a mom? She is sexualized almost every other scene, and it was just so weird, especially for a movie that's a family film. A joke or two is fine. Not even really, because all of them were just weird and awkward. I feel like I don't know. Yeah, we were just kind of like, oh, that's weird. And watching it again, I was just like, I really think it should have been told from the point of view of Michael Orr, instead of Leanne Tuttiers. I forget her last name, but Sandra Bullock's character. It should have been switched around. I would have loved to see more from his point of view instead of the other way around. Let's see. Next up, we watched The Elephant Man, which, man, Aaron doesn't cry ever when we're watching movies, but this one got her like twice. And it was kind of like amazing to see. It is David Lynch. It's a David Lynch movie shot in black and white, starring John Hurt and Anthony Hopkins, who are both brilliant. It is a tough movie to swallow. It's based on a true story, and this man had this horrific face, this disease that affected his face and his body, his back, and it's inspirational, yet it's that one's tough to watch. That's a hard movie to recommend, but it is excellent because it was shot on obviously film, but it was, I want to say it was made in like the 70s or 80s, but it looks as if it came out in like in the 30s, 40s, 50s, early 50s. So the way it's shot is brilliant. Next up, we watched another David Lynch movie, The Straight Story. I think maybe my favorite David Lynch movie. The soundtrack is just so brutal. The cinematography is amazing. Sissy Spacek, super underrated in that film. The main guy's name, who I forget, it's the only movie I've ever seen him in. It's just, he's so good. He was nominated for Best Actor that year. I don't know who beat him out, but that and Harry Dean Stanton kind of is I wouldn't say cameo because he plays an important role, but you don't see him till a certain point. Everyone should see Straight Story, especially if they have a brother in their life or a sibling. It's a movie about making amends, and this old man in his 70s goes on this journey to see his brother that lives 300-something miles away, and he doesn't have a license. He doesn't have much money, so he rigs his lawnmower to take him there. It's such a beautiful film. I was on a David Lynch binge because then I watched Eraserhead, which is like, if you were to watch all three of those movies without knowing who the director was, and then I told you the same director directed all the three of those movies you just watched, you would not believe it. I guarantee it. Next up, I watched Come and See, which for some reason that movie. I mean, the movie came out in 1985. I'd never heard about it before. Never read anything about it online. And all of a sudden, that movie kind of blew up this past year. There's people talking, posting about it all the time. And it's World War II, told from the perspective of this young man, this teenage boy in Russia, who decides he's going to go fight. Or he probably doesn't really decide. I think he has to. It is a movie that is, man, I watched a lot of difficult films to get through last year. I mean, it is just a tough movie to finish. It is brutal. Definitely don't watch it if you don't enjoy being sick to your stomach. The little tagline I wrote for it was haunting. Truly depicts what evil is capable of, especially in that last scene. Man. Next up, I watched Tarkovsky's Mirror, which I just said rewatch down the road. Then I watched Megan Levy with Aaron. It was a really cool story about this. This kind of woman who was down on her luck, didn't really have much going on in her life, and she decides to join the army specifically to train dogs who sniff out bombs. And it's the story of her and this dog. And I had bought it because the movie on DVD because I was going to go work with the director, Gabrielle Calperthwaite, on Our Friend. So I really didn't get a chance to watch it till because Aaron and I wanted to watch it together. I kind of forgot about it sitting on my shelf when we finally put it in, and I believe I want to say it was Gabriella's first narrative feature, and she knocked it out of the park. It was a great film. And Rooney Mara, or is it her sister Kate? Kate Mara was she did a great job. Next up, I watched Spider-Man, the original with Tobey Maguire, and I just put classic. I mean, it is. It's just a fun movie. And then we watched Spider-Man 2, which is a phenomenal superhero movie. Just so many great action sequences, such a solid script. I do have some issues with it. I think the MJ and Peter Parker relationship in that movie is just like terrible. It's so toxic. But it's a great, great superhero movie, one of the best. Oh, yeah, Aaron and I were going on a Spider-Man-thon because I think the trailer, whenever we started watching these, the trailer had dropped for whatever the new one is, No Way Home. So we watched Homecoming, which I actually really liked Spider-Man Homecoming the first time I saw it in theaters, and so last year was the first time I'd rewatched it for the second time, and I was okay. It's a fine movie, but I just really didn't enjoy it as much as I did the first time. All right, I need a sip of water. My word, I've been talking for 42 minutes straight, and I'm actually almost done. I think I'm going to start speeding it up. Also, I'm using a new mic today. I have an Audio Technica. I have no idea what number follows that, but so if the audio sounds a lot more crisper and nice, that's because I'm using a little bit better mic. But anyways. Next up, I watched The Count of Monte Cristo, which Noah and I, the last episode we did together, I believe we talked a lot about it. So you should go check that out. It's a must watch. Next up, I watched Logan, which is Hugh Jackman as Wolverine. I think I took him for granted. I think we all did. What a really solid James Mangold film. Next up, I watched The Last of the Mohicans, which I kind of was disappointed with. I really like Michael Mann as a director. But I feel like this one, there's something, I feel like there has to be a longer cut out there. Just because the movie, I feel like in the last 20 minutes just really kind of skipped over some stuff. Next up, I watched Wind River, which I thought was amazing. Lane Garrison and I actually, the last time we spoke on the phone, we were talking about it because his buddy Taylor Sheridan wrote and directed it. And he knocked it out of the ballpark. I'd love to have him on the show someday. Both him and Lane. Next up, Aaron and I watched all of Downton Abbey, which I thoroughly enjoyed. And then we watched the movie Downton Abbey movie, and then we're really excited for the second Downton Abbey movie coming out, I think, May. We watched the trailer the other day, and we were like, that looks like the most boring movie ever if you didn't know what Downton Abbey was or hadn't seen anything prior, because like it's gonna be a pretty enjoyable movie, I'm sure. But like it's hard to make a movie out of just people talking, and I really enjoyed it. I really enjoyed it a lot. I remember just like jumping in bed at night and be like, all right, let's try to watch as many episodes as we can before we have to go to sleep. I was addicted. Next up, I showed Aaron Anchorman. I think we both enjoyed that. It's one of the funniest movies of all time. Will Ferrell's great. Steve Carell's excellent in that. Paul Rudd's great too. They all are. Next up, I watched. Man, I'm having a hard time moving these. Oh, next up, I watched No Time to Die. I feel like I talked a little bit about that. Spoiler alert. I'm spoiling this movie for the sake of this joke. So if you haven't seen No Time to Die, the last James Bond film with Daniel Craig, do not listen to this. Skip 15 seconds. I accidentally spoiled this movie for someone at a shoot I was at, where this guy and I were talking about it, and this girl was saying, I totally misread it. I thought she said she really liked it. I think she said, I really can't wait to see it. And I was so caught up about me and this guy talking about it. He really liked it. I did not like it. And I mentioned the fact that James Bond dies in that movie. And she was like, oh, thanks. And I felt really bad. She obviously wasn't hurt. I could tell I kind of ticked her off. But life moves on. Also, the movie had been out 2 months. I mean, go see it at that point. Is it really my fault? No, next up I watched Nathan For You. I watched I want to say 3 seasons. Nathan For You, I think it is top 10 shows for me of all time. Nathan Fielder, wow, what a odd talent. I'd love to shake his hand one day, and I think he would be very awkward and weird, and I think that's what makes the show so great. You should check that out. I think I watched it on Hulu. I think it might be on Amazon Prime or HBO Max or something like that. It is a show where this guy, he is so true to his character of this awkward, scrawny young man who's always wearing a suit, and he goes and helps businesses, but he intentionally comes up with this terrible idea. And so the whole purpose of the show is what will people be willing to agree to just because there are cameras in the vicinity? Oh, it's such a hilarious show. I'm going to have to rewatch that one. Next up, I watched Greystoke, Tarzan, and that was definitely a shorter title I wrote because it has, the title makes you drowsy reading the entire thing. I was really disappointed in that. I feel like the first hour is really solid of this world building, character building, and then the rest of it is just blah. And I think Robert Towne wrote the first script, and they did rewrites to it. So I'm sure that first draft by Robert Towne was brilliant, and they just completely butchered the rest of it. Next up, I watched one of my favorite cult films ever, Lars and the Real Girl, which was directed by Craig Gillespie. I don't know how you say his last name. Or Gillips. I don't know. Anyways, the movie is phenomenal. Ryan Gosling is hilarious. He plays this really quiet, mustachioed, awkward, large man who lives in his brother's garage. And he orders a doll, and it comes to him, and he develops a relationship with it, and the whole town kind of grows concerned for him. It's a really unique film that was nominated for Best Screenplay. I don't believe it won. But Ryan Gosling, that may be in his top 3 performances too. He's so great in that. Next up, I watched Inside Llewyn Davis, which is directed by the Coen brothers. It is one of the best soundtracks of all time, and Oscar Isaac is a truly talented man who I hope to work with one day. Oh my goodness, Erin and I watched Zoolander, and that may be one of her favorite comedies of all time. I think we watched it 2 or 3 times in a row. Because she just thought it was just the funniest thing. And honestly, one of the greatest things about that movie is obviously Ben Stiller, but his performance is really great. He is hilarious. Whenever you're watching it, I don't think of Ben Stiller. I think of Derek Zoolander. And I think that is the ultimate compliment for an actor. Next up, we watched Lion King, which is Aaron's favorite Disney movie. That or Pocahontas. I think she switches up between the two. I really love The Lion King. I think the last 10 minutes or 15 minutes was super rushed. I wish it was a longer movie. But obviously it was a kid's film, so it's not like they can, make a 2-hour animated Disney movie. I think it would be Maybe my favorite if they did give it more time. Well, I don't know. Tarzan's pretty great. But Lion King's great. We really like that. Next up, we watched The Prestige, which every time I watch it, I love it so much more than I did previously. It's an amazing Christopher Nolan film that, Hugh Jackman's great in it. Christian Bale's great in it. I think her name's, Rebecca Hall is great in it. Scarlett Johansson's in it. David Bowie, Michael Caine, if I already didn't say him. Andy Serkis, what a great cast. But the idea that Christopher Nolan made magicians seem interesting in a movie in Victorian England is just like, or not Victorian England. No. What time period was it? Definitely not that. Why did I say that? Now I seem dumb. As if my listeners already didn't know that. But definitely check it out if you haven't. It's such a great film. Next up, I watched maybe my favorite comedy of all time, Monty Python and the Holy Grail. I mean, I could just sit here and do quotes all day, but I will not, because I think I would only find happiness out of that, not my listeners. Next up, Aaron and I watched seasons 1 through 5 of Better Call Saul, and it is now my number one favorite show, at least dramatic work of all time. I think it trumps Breaking Bad, at least as long as this last season, season 6, is stellar. I really think it will be. If not, then I think Breaking Bad takes that top spot, which I believe Aaron and I watched immediately after. Oh, yeah, we also watched The Night Museum. I think we talked about that National Treasure in a podcast we did a while back. Let's see. I watched Bong Joon-ho's Memories of Murder, which is a great film. I watched that on Blu-ray on my, I get it on Criterion when it was on sale. Definitely worth it. Oof, what a great third act. One of the best third act mystery films I've ever seen. Stunning cinematography. Aaron and I watched Adam McKay's The Big Short, which I really, really like. It's a terrifying movie to watch, but it also is hilarious. Great writing. Great performances from Steve Carell, Ryan Gosling, Christian Bale. Did I already say Christian Bale? No, I said Steve Carell. Christian Bale. And a great supporting cast too, and it's Brad Pitt, of course. It's not a fun film to watch because it educates you on how money works in this country and really in the world, and it's scary. It's scary. It talks about the 2008 crash. It's a tough one to watch, but Adam McKay does a great job of keeping you interested with humor. Let's see. I'm getting near the end. Let's see. I'm skipping films I really want to talk about. Oh, Enchanted with Amy Adams and Patrick Dempsey. That's a classic one. Spider-Man No Way Home. I think Anthony and I talked a little bit about that. I think it's a solid film. I bet it's still in theaters, so I could probably go still see it one more time if I wanted. But honestly, I think the first couple hours of that movie is a slog until the two other Spider-Man rejoin him. But I think it was a solid, possibly ending to the Tom Holland saga. If not, I'd love to see more. Then we watched La La Land, which is like one of my favorite movies of all time, top 5. I have a podcast Aaron and I did way back in the day. It was like one of my first podcast episodes. So go check that out. And then the last movie I watched of 2021 was Mystic River, directed by the GOAT, or one of the GOATs, Clint Eastwood. Clint, if I may. Starring Tim Robbins, who won Best Supporting Actor, Sean Penn, who won Best Lead Actor, and Kevin Bacon and Lawrence Fishburne, and so many more people. Amy Gray something. And someone else, I forget their name, but excellently shot. Another kind of tough film to get through because what the content is. A murder. Sean Penn's daughter's found dead, and Tim Robbins as a child was molested. So if you can get through that, then you can get through maybe anything. What a weird podcast this has been. Just me talking, just rattling off the movies I watched in 2021. At least most of the movies I watched. I skipped some because I was like, this isn't worth talking about. But yeah, I hope you enjoyed this episode. I hope it filled your drive, or you're listening at work and you're supposed to be doing work, and I kind of distract you from that. You're welcome. Wow. Oh, my throat is shot. Woo! Um, I love talking about movies, obviously. So I hope you guys get a kick out of that. I feel like I'm definitely going to do a lot more interviews coming up soon. I think that's just something I enjoy more than just talking just by myself. There'll be a couple. Oh, and I also kind of have an experiment I want to post on my YouTube channel. I'm not going to post it on Spotify or anywhere you can just listen. You'll have to go to YouTube to watch it. But it's a video of me talking about books every actor should read. And so I'm going to try maybe one or two of those a month and see how people react to it. But thank you for listening to this podcast. If you ever want to go support me, go to Spotify. If you're listening on Spotify, I feel like that's what most people listen on. Or go to Apple or whatever, and there's always going to be a link leading to my Anchor where you can click on that, see other ways you can listen to my podcast, and see ways you can support the podcast by throwing some money or sharing the podcast. That's always nice when people do that. Let me know what guests I should have on. I'm going to have some really great guests coming up, especially Noah Winter and some actors, filmmakers, musicians. But appreciate you listening. God bless, and have a great week whenever you're listening to this. Ka-chow.